can talk.
When Abram and Sarai lived in the land of Ur of the Chaldees, God came close to Abram and said, Abram, get up and leave the people and the place that you've known, and follow me. Follow me to a land that I will show you, and there I will bless you, and through you all the people of the earth will be blessed. And Abram followed God across the desert from Ur and Haran to the land of Canaan. And there God did bless him. He gave him flocks and herds, and when Abram and Sarah were old, he gave them a son named Isaac. Abram sent his servant across the desert a camel loaded with treasures to find a wife for Isaac back in Haran, the city that Abram had left. And the servant brought Rebekah back as a wife for Isaac. Abram and Sarah died and were buried. And the servant. And God blessed Isaac and Rebekah with not one, but two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of soup. And Jacob tricked Isaac into giving him the blessing that Esau was to receive. And in fury, Esau threatened to kill Jacob, who had to flee across the desert back to the town of Haran, where his mother came from. In time, Isaac and Rebekah too died and were buried. And many years passed. While he was in Haran, Jacob acquired not one but two wives and many children, 12 sons. So that by the time they returned to the land of Canaan, Jacob had a large family. And he settled in the land of Canaan, and there his family grew up. Of all of his sons, Jacob's favorite was his son Joseph, the second to the youngest. Joseph was the apple of his father's eye, and Jacob gave Joseph a special cloak to wear. All of his brothers knew that Jacob was his father's favorite. And his older brothers, the 10 of them, hated Joseph because of it. One time, while his brothers were off caring for the herds and flocks of Jacob, far away, from home, their father became worried and called to Joseph, who didn't go away and take care of the herds with the others, and said, "Go and find out what's happened to your brothers." And so Joseph set out to find his brothers. And when they saw him coming from a ways off, his brothers said, "Oh, here comes Joseph, Dad's favorite. When he gets here, let's kill him and go back and take his cloak back to Father and tell him that he was torn to pieces by wild animals." The brothers hatched this plan. But one of the brothers said, "No, let's not kill him right away. Let's just capture him and throw him into a pit. We can kill him after lunch." And so, when Joseph came, they caught him and they threw him down into a cistern and sat down to eat their lunch. Judah was hoping that he could sneak away while his brothers weren't looking and help Joseph to get away. But before that could happen, a passing caravan of Ishmaelites came by. And the brothers had a new plan. They would sell Joseph to the Ishmaelite traders, take his cloak dipped in the blood of a sheep they had slaughtered, and show it to their father and tell their father that Joseph had been torn to bits by wild animals. So Joseph was led away by the Ishmaelite traders, who took him far across the desert to the land of Egypt. And there they sold Joseph to a man named Potiphar, who was the chief of Pharaoh's guard. And Joseph worked in Potiphar's house. Joseph was a good worker, and he earned his master's trust. And so soon Joseph was in charge of all the things that happened in Potiphar's house. Of all that Potiphar owned, nothing was withheld, except, of course, for Potiphar's wife. Meanwhile, Joseph's brothers had returned to their father, Jacob, carrying Joseph's cloak, and they told their father their story of how Joseph was attacked by wild animals and killed. And Jacob mourned for Joseph all his days. No matter what the other brothers did, nothing could console Jacob over the loss of his favorite son, Joseph. Back in Egypt, Joseph, while working in Potiphar's house, got in trouble because Potiphar's wife told a lie about something that Joseph did not do. But Potiphar had Joseph thrown into the Pharaoh's prison. And there, it seemed that Joseph had been forgotten. But in the prison, Joseph earned the reputation for being a hard worker and being kind, and soon he was made master over all of the prison, working only under the warden, the master of the prison. While he was there, Joseph, one day, was talking to two of the other prisoners. They had been looking downcast and confused. And Joseph asked them what was wrong. And they said, "We have each had the most interesting and frightening dreams." And they told Joseph their dreams. And Joseph told them what each dream meant after he prayed to God for wisdom. In time, the first prisoner, who was one of Pharaoh's officials, was executed just as Joseph had predicted the dream meant. And the other prisoner was restored to Pharaoh's service. Joseph asked him to remember Joseph and tell the Pharaoh about him when he was released. But alas, the servant forgot Joseph, and Joseph remained in prison. Until one day, the Pharaoh had a strange dream. He called together all of his wise men and wondered what his dream might mean, and none of them could tell him. He called together his magicians and asked them what the dream might mean, and none of them could tell him. And finally, the cupbearer, the servant who had been with Joseph in the prison, remembered Joseph and said, "Pharaoh, when I was in the prison, I too had a dream that I did not understand. And I went to a man who was a stranger in this land, a foreigner named Joseph from the land of Canaan. And he told me what my dream meant. And it came true just as he had said. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph and had him summoned from the prison and brought before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, "So, I understand you can tell what dreams mean?" And Joseph said, "Not I, but the God that I serve, the God who made heaven and earth, he can tell Pharaoh what the dream means." And so Pharaoh explained his dream. He explained how in his dream there were 7 fat cattle coming up from the river Nile. And then up from the river Nile came 7 skinny cows, and they ate the 7 fat cows. And Joseph prayed, and God told Joseph that Pharaoh's dream meant that there would be 7 years of severe famine in the land where the crops would not grow and the rain would not fall. But before those, there would be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of abundant crops. Joseph told Pharaoh that it would be a wise thing to save the food in Pharaoh's storehouses during the years of plenty to help them get through the famine. When Pharaoh heard the plan, he thought it was a very good plan. And he decided that of all the people in Egypt, he would have Joseph be the one in charge of the plan. And so he had a fine robe in the Egyptian style brought to Joseph. And Pharaoh took off his ring and gave it to Joseph. And he put Joseph in charge of all Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. And Joseph did as he had told Pharaoh he would, administered a plan to save the crops in the 7 good years, so that when the lean years came, there would be food in the land. The first 7 years, each crop, each season was better than the last, and Joseph stored up much grain and food in Pharaoh's barns. And then the famine began, and there was hunger throughout the land, and people from throughout Egypt had to come to Joseph to get food. The famine stretched not just from Egypt, but all the way to the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his sons still lived. And in time, Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy food. When they went to Egypt, they were brought before Joseph, who recognized them, but did not let on that he had. And he sold them the food, and he asked about his brother, Benjamin, who was not with the other brothers, fearing that they had killed Benjamin just as they had sold him. When his brothers told him that Benjamin was back in Canaan, he made one of them, Judah, stay behind while he sent the others back to bring his brother back so that he could see with his own eyes. When the brothers returned, Joseph could keep up his silence no longer. He let them know who he was. And the brothers were terrified, fearing that Joseph would take revenge for the evil that they had done him. And he said, "Do not be afraid, for this was God's plan all along. You meant what you did to me to be evil, but God meant it for good. God used it to save our whole family. Now go and fetch our father, for the famine will continue for many years, and I will ask Pharaoh, and he will let our family graze our herds in the richest of the land of Egypt." And it was in that way that God preserved the promise to the family of Abraham in Egypt. So I wonder if there's a part of this story that you like the best. Wonder which part of this story you didn't like. I wonder if there's any part of this story that reminds you of something in your story. I wonder how God is blessing you. I wonder